Welcome to Complex Creatures, exploring spirituality and the common good.
Greetings, my friends. Welcome to Complex Creatures, the podcast that takes a look at spirituality as an underutilized tool when it comes to issues of the common good or the public sphere. Typically, we think of spirituality as that which pertains to the individual, the personal, the private, maybe for one's personal growth or maturation, or just a sense of connection with that which is beyond ourselves. But it's also a tool, and an underutilized one, as I said, to help connect us with one another and to help repair the rifts in society. So we want to look at all things spirituality from all sorts of traditions and thinkers to see what we can grow from, learn from, and utilize in how we negotiate and navigate our world. We are complex creatures, so we need complicated tools, or rather sophisticated tools. I think spirituality is one of those. My name is Jarrod Longbonds. I'm a minister at a church called Peachtree Christian Church in Midtown Atlanta, Georgia. I have a PhD in theology. I love to think about the ways that spirituality, theology, philosophy basically can make sense of our world, but also can help us build a world that is hopefully one that's virtuous and good. As always, I'm with my friend Alan, our producer, who is a partner and partner in crime here. Alan, how are you today?
I'm doing wonderfully, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, because if there is a spiritual tool I am terrible at, it's celebration.
Celebration. That's right, Alan. Today we're going to talk about festivity or celebration as a spiritual tool. Mostly because we're sitting right now. It's funny to me. We are in the middle of summer, yet by the calendar, the school calendar, we're now at the end of summer. Kids will be going back to school, or already are going back to school. As an aside, just because I have a platform here to state my opinion, let me say this. I really, really wish we could go to year-round school with very heavy breaks like a lot of European and Asian schools have. Or let's go back in time and give me that full agrarian summer where we don't go back till after Labor Day. Yeah, that's the reason why we have the school break the way we do. It was an agrarian-driven thing, but this half-measure thing where we go back at the beginning of August just drives me crazy. But summertime is a time where we think of festivity and celebration. Maybe that's because that's when a lot of vacations are planned, or if you're British, you might say that's when you go on holiday, which is an interesting word. Maybe it's because we have in America one of our great national holidays, the 4th of July. Maybe it's because this year we have celebrated and are watching right now the Olympics. And at the time of this recording, we're still living in the furor of all the uproar and anger that people have or about the opening ceremonies. And were they in this Paris Olympics, were they mocking Da Vinci's Last Supper and thereby a Christian sacrament, or were they doing something for Bacchanalia, or was it a combination of both, or was it an artistic rendering talking about inclusion and tolerance, or was it, ultimately I've seen a lot of hot takes over it, but the event itself, the opening ceremonies, are supposed to be festive and celebratory, and it's supposed to draw us together. So there's just a lot about this season that lends the attention to festivity. And so I wanted to talk about it, and I wanted to use as a jumping off point a philosopher who I admire named Josef Pieper. That's how I think you say his name. He's German, so if you pronounce it like an American, it would look like Joseph Piper. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that his name is pronounced Josef Pieper. He is a German Catholic philosopher, a Thomist, which means he follows the way of Thomas Aquinas, and Aristotelian, which means he follows a lot of Aristotle's kind of thought. He wrote this very famous book that's very influential for me called Leisure as the Basis of Culture. And I'm probably going to talk about that book in another time, but it's a similar theme. Leisure. What do you think of, Alan, when I use that word leisure?
Well, my wife would say that I don't know what the word means.
Because she's implying that you're a workaholic?
She is. She is. And she'll be right. But it's a workaholism with purpose. No. When I think of leisure, I think of time off, time to recharge the batteries, ways to experience something other, so that when I get back to the mundane, it is more purposeful.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably a very healthy definition as far as most contemporary people would have. Sometimes we think of maybe leisure as being activity that is inactivity or idleness. Today, you can think about binge watching television or scrolling devices or just kind of idleness. What PIPA shows is in the history of the Western world and Western thinking, leisure has at its roots this Latin word, scola, which is where we get school from. Now, leisure isn't simply about inactivity. It is about restfulness, but it's about a more receptive attitude in the world. It's the kind of a ceasing from a certain sort of labor of the workaday world, so that we kind of steep ourselves into being. So it's not disconnected from learning. It's this scola. We learn in leisure, but it's different than the kind of learning you would do in a laboratory. It's the kind of learning that you would get from just being. Let's say, I don't know, there's a certain sort of learning that a child who grew up on a farm has and gains from just observing the seasons, of playing and noticing that the woolly worms change colors and develop their fur at a certain time, which tells them where they are in the season and maybe even what weather is to come. I mean, there is a certain sort of learning that's more observational and receiving through leisure. So it's not mere idleness, but it's also not necessarily to produce something in the world. And in there's this kind of profound sense of growth that can happen with leisure. PIPA also wrote the book that I'm thinking of today called In Tune with the World, A Theory of Festivity. And just in very PIPA fashion, he wants to talk about festivity like he wants to talk about leisure as something different from the workaday world, the workaday life. You called it the mundane a moment ago. This is your 9-to-5 sort of life.
Yep.
There's two forms of art that he reflects on in his work, and they're two works of art that basically make up the modern day university system. I'm not very good at pronouncing Latin, but forgive me. But there's the artes or the arts serviles or serviles. I'm not sure exactly how I should pronounce that, right? But they're the arts that are, so that you could tie them to useful things or utilitarian things, that you do them to produce something else. So they're the kinds of arts that we do to make things to make our world go. And ultimately, when we start thinking about higher education, these sorts of things become associated with more of the STEAM-related or STEM-related fields. It's about the production of things for our economy, the production of goods and services. And then the other side of it is the ars liberalis, or the liberal arts, we will come to call them. And this kind of art or work, PIPA says, does not have a purpose outside of itself, that it is meaningful in itself, and for that very reason is neither useful in the strict sense nor servile or serviceable. So there are these two forms of art that we can think about in education or in our daily life, and what he's wanting to think about are the liberal arts, or the freeing things that we can do in the world that don't have an end outside of themselves, but may in fact be an end in and of themselves. So that is to say, it may be the purpose of reading or reading literature or studying art. The prospect of doing it, or the journey of reading or observing the beautiful thing, may be the purpose of it. It may not exist just so that we can become a more erudite person, so that we can have a more interesting anecdote at a cocktail party, or so that we can make another widget that would sell for a lot more money. It's just a good in and of itself. And for him, celebrations or true festivals fall into that that world of thinking, the liberal arts. He says this in his book. I'm going to quote him: "To celebrate a festival means to do something which is in no way tied to other goals, which has been removed from all so that, and in order to, true festivity cannot be imagined as residing anywhere but in the realm of activity that is meaningful in itself." I think that makes festivity worth studying, because so very much of the contemporary imagination is utilitarian. We have a hard time thinking about studying things or developing time in our calendar that doesn't produce something else.
Right.
But if we do, by the way, Alan, and I don't know what you think of this, if we do give time to things that don't produce something else, we feel embarrassed talking about it.
100% agreed. In fact, you're touching on a bunch of things right now that I've been struggling with for years. So I look forward to your future thoughts here.
Well, I mean, let me just say this. Like, I think it's kind of customary for me. Like, people say, "How you doing?" or "What are you doing? What's going on?" You say, "Oh, I've been busy, very, very busy." And it's a knee-jerk reaction. I don't even think about it. Like, as if I say, no, you really haven't been doing too much. Like, that would be sort of a shameful thing.
Right.
I haven't conscientiously thought of it that way. There's been a lot of work that's been done calling our culture one based on the Protestant work ethic or a puritanical system that, there's a lot of utilitarian thinking in that. Max Weber, the sociologist, famously talked about the Protestant work ethic. And I think there's a lot to be said for those theorists and those thinkers. But our society here, at least in America, is one where we think about self-improvement, right, for education, right? Like, if we're not improving ourselves or our standing, then we're maybe wasting our time.
Right.
And that's not okay, right? And we have a hard time talking about it, but we know that feeling when we feel like we have to say we're busy, or we can't say, well, I'm just relaxing right now. It is this knee-jerk thing. It's deep down in our cultural DNA. But not everything needs to be. I think we can just say this as an axiomatic sort of thing and agree on it, whether we buy into it. Not everything we do needs to produce something else. And we try to struggle with our kids. When our kids say, why do I need to learn math? Why do I need to know fractions? When am I going to use this in the real world?
Right.
Those are questions that are really based on practicality, right? Like, all it's going to do is going to help me be this kind of performer in the world. I'm going to be an accountant or what have you, right? And then, if you're a real nerd like me, you say, well, because God created all things in the world, and therefore it's all worth knowing and studying and learning, and curiosity is an inherent good, and really falls on deaf ears. I think in our side, we have to cultivate this. Some things are ends in and of themselves. For people, that's what festivity is. And because of that, because it's often associated with play, which we allow in children, right? I think that if you were to go to the park right now and you were to analyze kids playing, and perhaps one of them is your child, you could probably have a relatively technical conversation with another parent saying, wow, isn't this play helpful for their development? Mm-hmm. The way they use the jungle gym, it's strengthening their grip in their hands, and the way they are overcoming problems, they're negotiating the maze or whatnot. Now, this is so helpful for their cognitive and physical development, and even socially as they play with each other. I think most people would kind of go, come on, man, lighten up. Like, they're just playing and they're kids. Mm-hmm. Because we also know that part of it's true too. It's like, that's just part of what kids do. It's important. And we make room for that for children, but we don't ever stop being creatures or animals of play. It's inherent to the human animal, just like it's inherent to most other animals. But we feel a lot more defensive or shameful about it as adults. Like, there's these just times where I am just playing, and that's okay, because that is part of what it means to be a human being, right?
100% agreed.
So that's why it's often associated with play. And I would say that in a more religious aspect, festivity can be associated with sacrifice, right? This, in a very religious context, festivities often follow great sacrifices of animals or crops or gifts. And then in a very small way, certain festivals or celebrations follow a sacrifice maybe of time. So I come from, farmland in Illinois. I was, as a kid, I didn't know a farmer, but all I had to do is drive to the edge of our city, and I could see farmland for as far as the eye could see. I was surrounded by agribusiness. I didn't know any farmers until I started going to a particular church. And then I heard from them. There was this profound, strong impulse from our preacher to preach about keeping the Sabbath holy, like not going to work on Sunday and all that kind of stuff. He's very relatively literal about all of it, right? So he had a pretty strong sermon or message on it. And I'd hear from the farmers who really struggled with that. Wait, you're telling me there's a whole day I'm going to have to give up? Like, what if that's the only day of the week where it's not raining? What if, it's harvest? As someone who then married a farmer's daughter, I can tell you when harvest time comes, all bets are off. To say I am going to forego work for this time is an incredible act of faith. It's an incredible act of discipline to say, I'm going to entrust to God that there's going to be time and resources to get done what I need to get done to make my living, right? So even a concept like a Sabbath is in and of itself a sacrifice. And so festivity often has that element of play. It also has that element of sacrifice. And ultimately, at the end of the day, according to Pipa, it is about something being in an end of itself. And that's why he can say something else. And let me just move to another quote when he talks about the sacrifice, but also reflecting our riches. He says, even in conditions of extreme material scarcity, the withholding from work, so taking time off for festival and play, in the midst of a life normally governed by work, creates an area of free surplus. This then unexpectedly brings us to a new aspect of a holiday. A festival is essentially a phenomenon of wealth, not, to be sure, a wealth of money, but of existential riches. Existential riches. So festivity or play and all that stuff that's associated with celebration, according to Pipa, really becomes detached from economy. It becomes detached from the market, which is very dangerous thinking for our contemporary world. It detaches because there is an abundance that is more foundational than any material good, and that is the existential riches. So there's more to life than just producing and consuming. There's more to life than just the market. And because there's also more time, there's more than enough. You detach from it, and it shows that there's a riches of the existential variety that gives us space for something. And, in our typical sense, my grammar even wants me to say space for something else, like something else that's more productive. But ultimately, again, for festivity, it is a thing in and of itself where the purpose is baked in. It doesn't exist for another purpose. It is itself good. Let me pause for a moment. Okay. That's what festivity is in a very brief kind of sort of nutshell, celebration. I wonder if that feels foreign to you in your experience of festivities in our culture, or I wonder if that feels right to you.
Let's see. Let me think about this for a second. I think that it feels right to me. But I would also say that in my mind, festivities have an element of hustle and bustle to them. Like I would say that in my life, whenever there's a festivity, it feels like it's almost more work than just working.
Uh-huh. Right. Well, say more about that and give me an example of that. Or
Sure. I mean, okay. So Christmas time, I do a lot of work with both music and with digital media, and At Christmas time, I'm called upon a lot to deal with, social media posts, print materials, videos of things that are happening around Christmas, music for things that are happening around Christmas, and I'm still expected to meet both sides of the family for meals, and still expected to make sure that the kid is having a good experience for the holidays, and I'm expected to. So it's like the work life intensifies and the family life intensifies to the point where it's almost unimaginable to get everything done.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing there, first off, I completely understand, especially around Christmas, which
I think everybody does. I don't think I'm unique in this way.
no, I think you're right. I mean, I think look at the way we built our, built our calendar, right? Christmas is at the end of the year, right? So there is this entire push to get the books closed out by the end of the year. What are going to end in the red? You're going to end in the black. I mean, that's just like a huge financial burden, or at least a logistical burden put at the end of the year. And then there's expectations we put on top of the celebration. And then, in our setting, as I lead a congregation and a fairly, large staff, and, it is a time when you're on display. So you got to show the world what you're doing. You got to produce. So it turns this celebratory season itself into a time of production. And the fact that's so funky because in the true Christian liturgical calendar, Christmas doesn't begin at the beginning of December. This is Advent. Advent is a time of anticipation and expectation. And then Christmas is a 12-day season starting on December 25th, right? And it's the 12 days of Christmas. It goes to Epiphany. And I'm one of those kind of nerdy people that I try not to say Merry Christmas until Christmas. And then on January the 3rd or 4th, I'll go out to the store and pick something up and I'll say, "You having a nice Christmas?" I'll say it like that. "Are you having a nice Christmas?" to the clerk, and they say, "Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah, kind of, tired, but it was a good one." And how about you? I'm like, "Still having it." I'm that nerdy person that's reminding people there's still Christmas, which, if we followed that liturgical calendar as opposed to the civic calendar or whatever else, we have room. We have 12 days of festivity to chill. And also, Advent could be slower, but it's been taken over by the winding down of our year. Commercialism has made it an exciting time. So we got, Christmas displays out, around Halloween, and I'm not a bah humbug sort of guy. I love the Christmas. I love it all. So it's great. But have we turned these opportunities for festivity and enjoyment into moments of production? I think so. I think so, very much. So to me, what I'm describing from Pipa seems a bit foreign. It seems right to me. Like that's the deepest yearning of my soul. I want spaces of celebration that exist for themselves, but it seems like so little in my world. So much, or I could say so much of my world pushes me the other way. There's a funny commercial. It's one of those insurance commercials for, I don't know, probably the people who do those insurance, commercials about not becoming your parents, which I think is hilarious. But there's another one where there's somebody who's out in the, in some wilderness landscape, and they're looking at a mountain, they're looking at a view, and it's gorgeous. And they're no one's discovered it. It's unique to them. It's off the beaten path. And then someone says, "Excuse me, are you done?" And he turns around, there's a line of people with their selfie sticks and and they got to move on. And this next person kind of rudely says, "Are you done?" And they snap a picture of them, video of themselves saying, "Hey, me here, just manifesting gratitude, practicing, grace." And, all the buzzwords of these spirituality and the words that I think are very meaningful, but was it good enough to simply see the beautiful place and be in it? That's what people would yearn for. Or did it have to quickly become a thing to produce that could get likes, followers, clicks, views, downloads, and then you're selling something? Yeah. So that operates, that whole concept, that whole mindset operates on this concept of scarcity that our entire market is built on. There's not enough time, there's not enough resources, and those are scarce things, which drives prices. And ultimately, most religions that I know of and most spiritualities I know of are not teaching scarcity as a concept. They're teaching about abundance as a concept. Walter Brueggemann talks about the myth of scarcity in the scriptures really coming from Pharaoh and being a harsh taskmaster over the Hebrew slaves, but following Genesis 1:1 and stuff, that's where God was showing a liturgy of abundance. Like there's always enough, right?
Right.
And it's caught up with the world of Christianity and Judaism and so many other religious traditions and spiritualities. We have a hard time getting outside of that scarcity narrative. And we double down into it, and we forget that the real driver is of abundance. And if there is an abundance of resources and beyond that, our existential abundance, then we can not only take time off, but we can actually enjoy the dance around the fire because it's meaningful in and of itself. And we can make the work of art and not think about it selling, or not think about it making us this great artist. Like we can create ourselves. I think sometimes adults don't think they can be creative anymore because they can't turn it into some sort of monetizable or prize-winning thing.
Right.
People used to make fun of George W. Bush when he became a painter, and because maybe they didn't think he was a good painter or whatever. I think it takes guts. I think it takes guts to be a grown person, especially a person of a public figure, to start doing something like that.
Absolutely. There's one of my favorite quotes is, I'm pretty sure it's Degas. He says something to the effect of, when you're in your teens and your 20s, it's easy to be talented. Everyone's talented. It's much harder to be talented when you're 50.
Right. I used to think talent was such a big deal. And now I realize the honing of talent, the work, the discipline is what the big deal is. And
I 100% agree.
But that sounds like I'm leaning into this whole, you got to work.
Right.
I also think...
But talent and creativity are two different things.
Yes, I agree with you on that. We'll talk more about that on another time, because I think creativity is something we really should talk about. Sure. I'm going to take this is a whole book. I mean, it's a short book, this In Tune with the World, a Theory of Festivity. So I'm not going to exhaust it, but I'm just going to pull some quotes and reflect on them along the way. What People really says in here is historically, he believes and argues that true festivity cannot happen without the gods. And he looks at the classical world of antiquity, and that most of these holidays have something to do with divinities, deities, the gods, the pantheon, or in monotheistic faith, something that God has done. And that sounds like a very startling sort of claim, but I think we're going to unearth why he suggests it. And then what does that mean for us living in a secular society so we don't have a national religion in our culture, but we have holidays. Because I think we should all just note that word holiday comes from holy day, and that the concept of a holiday at all came from the celebration of things that were holy or baked into a divine economy.
Sure.
So, here's something he says in the book: Memorial Days, which we have a Memorial Day, but Memorial Days are not in and of themselves festival days. Strictly speaking, the past cannot be celebrated festively unless the celebrant community still draws glory and exaltation from that past, not merely as reflected history, but by virtue of a historical reality still operative in the present. And now he moves on to Christian language here. If the incarnation of God is no longer understood as the event that directly concerns the present lives of men, it becomes impossible, even absurd to celebrate Christmas festively. If you take away the event itself from constituting your present moment, and it becomes just a memory, and it becomes just a past thing, then it begins to be less and less of a festival. So in religious speak, what he's talking about, like if we take the incarnation away from God, Jesus becoming mankind for our sake, then Christmas begins to lose a lot of its teeth. It becomes what it's become. And today, I think if you survey media trying to understand what Christmas is, I mean, it's a flimsy sort of defined thing. It's about family. It's about the warmth. It's really, what is it if it doesn't have those teeth? Same
thing. It's a celebration of the God of money. Go on.
So, well, exactly. And then, okay, now in another Christian part of the world, the Eucharist, the communion. People who's a Catholic would very much argue if this is not about God doing something in the midst, whether you believe in transubstantiation or not, but whether or not God is doing something, then it loses again its meaning, because it becomes a mere memory. Then it's just a moment of looking back on something. It has to be shaping the now of us. So let's remove it away from God altogether. What's the next biggest thing we can think of as a people? Well, that's why I believe national holidays are the thing that we create as a society, because the nation state is bigger than the individual, and it's bigger than the small community. So it's the biggest thing we can give attention to if we're not going to go to full-blown divinity. And so we try our best, and we come up with Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Flag Day and the 4th of July and so on. And there are people who still allow those days more than just a historical memory and more than just a celebration of a past event. They really do allow it to shape their imaginations. And so they're the folks that are really decorating graves on Memorial Day, and they're out there really feeling the power of that event and that experience. But for the garden variety person, a lot of these days on our national calendar become excuses for a 3-day weekend and just a backyard cookout or barbecue, right? It becomes an opportunity to have some more leisure or more fun. But the festival, that it is imbuing the people celebrating it with value of a certain type, well, it just depends on who's celebrating. The celebrant has to actually embody those things, those realities. And so that's why I really believe kind of in 2024, we see so many flimsy sorts of celebrations that are nationalistically based. It's also why I think you can look at nationalistic or patriotic celebrations and you can hear divinity resonant, the divine language resonant throughout. You can hear the battle hymn of the Republic. You can hear almost an equation of soldiers' deaths with the death of Jesus. You can almost insert America or nation for God in a lot, or Jesus in a lot of creeds. They take on the same language, and without that elevated divine language, maybe it doesn't have as much power to the celebration, right? So I think that kind of serves. And so I think that if I'm being very cynical, a lot of these days for a lot of people becomes, again, just an excuse to have the day off from work, get together with friends, have a cookout. But shaping their imagination in the moment and their identity, making it about the splendor and glory of something beyond themselves, I don't think it gets there for most people. He talks about a little bit later, that the value of life matters for a celebration. Can we festively celebrate the birth of a child if we hold with Jean-Paul Sartre's dictum, quote, "It is absurd that we are born," end quote? Anyone who is seriously convinced that our whole existence is something that would be better not being, and that consequently life is not worth living, can no more celebrate the birth of his child than any other birthday, his own or anyone else's, a 50th or 60th or any other. No single specific event can become the occasion for festive celebrations unless what? And so he's going to be driving at celebrations and festivity being about this grand affirmation of being, of life, the goodness of our interrelationships in the world. And he ties it to divinities, right? That's the classical religions or spiritualities all tie it into something beyond the human and beyond the nation state. Elsewhere, he writes, underlying all festive joy kindled by a specific circumstance, there has to be an absolutely universal affirmation extending to the world as a whole, to the reality of things and to the existence of man himself. Naturally, this approval need not be a product of conscious reflection. It need not be formulated at all. Nevertheless, it remains the sole foundation for festivity, no matter what happens to be celebrated in concreto. And as a radical nature of negation deepens, and consequently as anything but ultimate arguments become ineffectual, it becomes more necessary to refer to this ultimate foundation. By ultimate foundation, I mean the conviction that the prime festive occasion, which alone can ultimately justify all celebration, really exists. That to reduce it to the most concise phrase at bottom, everything that is good is good, and it is good to exist. So what we're resisting in celebration, we're resisting the meaninglessness of things because we don't think that's true. To truly celebrate is to affirm being. I think that's why that's why certain nihilistic aesthetics that are nihilistic, whether it's certain forms of music or film, are hard to be called celebratory, right? It's hard to celebrate when we're already denying the thing itself.
I like that. That's actually a very challenging idea to me.
How so?
So a lot of my life is made up in trying to do exactly the kinds of things that you're talking about, make everything practical. In fact, I do all kinds of artwork that I have a difficult time doing unless I can find a practical reason for its existence. Every time that I try to come up with a holiday for the family, I think, oh, maybe I can hit a book convention or a comic convention or something while I'm there in order to sell some of my materials. Every time that I or at least meet a client somewhere or something, you know. And I haven't tried to break away from that recently and do like a date night thing with the wife. And we ended up meeting another couple, and somehow in the process of just chatting with this other fellow, I ended up talking about potential business ventures, you know, and I gotta find ways outside of that.
Well, I wouldn't knock you for having natural conversations that can emerge, anywhere. And I too think that sometimes you can double up on things that you're doing for sure. But yeah, just a thing for itself is a profound. I think that when you see it happen, you say about a person, now that guy knows how to live.
Absolutely.
I'm going to include this section of Pipa with his own concluding remarks. He has 3 little conclusions in this little section of the book. I think they're going to carry us a little bit down the road. First, there can be no more radical assent to the world. So that's what festivity and celebration is, a radical assent to the world, right? So you think about, let's just break it down. Think about a harvest festival,
Yep.
A true festival of the harvest, right? Well, our harvest festivals today in our culture are largely about the Kodak moment or the Instagrammable moment.
Mm-hmm.
They're nice, right? But they lack that true festival nature of like the glory of the affirmation of a given thing. Because when we eat, it's important and it ties us to our contingency, our neediness. But our festival of the harvest is not as profound as it once was, where there was a stark reminder that this is what we have for the winter people. This is what we have.
Sure.
And once we're out, there's no more grocery store to go to. Like, that's it. So there's true thanksgiving to the land, to the earth, to the gods, to God, what have you, to goddess, to spirit, to universe. I mean, just I'm giving it the most ecumenical spiritual expression I can so people can connect.
Sure.
So there can be no more radical assent to the world than the praise of God, according to Pipa. the lauding of the creator of this same world. One cannot conceive of a more intense, more unconditional affirmation of being. Now, I take that if you wanted to use this in a non-theistic sense, spiritually, or a non-Christian sense, that whatever the higher power is you could think of here, but nevertheless, this is what Pippa is saying. His second summary point is that the ritual festival is the most festive form of all a form that festivity can possibly take. Third, there can be no deadlier, more ruthless destruction of festivity than the refusal of ritual praise. So he does, because the ritual is tied up in divinity. Pippa does tie this into, he makes the theological jump from the affirmation of being to a creator, to God. And that's what ritual is for. For those who aren't willing to go with me there, it would be, again, the source of being, whether universe or a grand spirit or what have you. But, for our purposes, this is a theological move. And to do so, it follows that true festivity is very tied to worship. That's what he means by ritual. It makes me sad as a Christian pastor that so much worship is not very festive. Now, there is worship that is very good in a mournful tone. Trust me, grief and mourning should be present in worship, I believe. But festivity in worship would imply that what we do in worship is not necessarily a tool to get you somewhere else. And sometimes that's how we think of it. We do these spiritual practices in worship so that we are more moral, or so that we get closer to God, or whatever language is germane to your tradition. But what if it's just itself the meaning of life? What if the activity of it is in and of itself the end? Like just the doing of it, like literally celebrates the goodness of being, our place within it, and it's what we are. We're the worshiping, or we're the adoring animal. So I think Pippa is very instructive, and I think it challenges and pushes back against our workaday world, and our world of the market, and our world of utilitarianism. And it leads me to another thinker that just I'm going to gloss on much more quickly, and that's Albert Borgman, this German philosopher who ended up working at the University of Montana in Missoula. And man, he wrote a lot of great stuff on, for those of you who know the philosopher Heidegger, he wrote a lot on his philosophy of technology. And one of the things that Borgman is often called is a communitarian philosopher. And he really is interested in a couple concepts that I love. One is focal practices, and then focal things, or focal realities. And one of his criticisms of technology, Alan, is that technology has its way of separating and dividing us into public and private places and spheres.
Okay.
Technology has a way of creating things that this is for the private space and this is for the public space. And what's eroded is the truly public thing, and what's truly public, what brings us together, according to Borgman, is to be communities of celebration. An example that he often gives of how technology has done that, it is paired alongside of his concept of a focal reality and a focal practice. So music, there was a time when music was something that was much more communal than it is right now. In your homes, you may have had a piano or a guitar or a record player or something like that in a room, and it may have been the focal reality in the room. Like when you walk in a room, the piano's the thing. I submit to you that even in rooms today where there's fireplaces, which are architecturally the focal reality of a room, there's probably a flat screen TV hanging above it, which has replaced the fireplace as the focal reality. And it's changed the nature of the community in the room. We're staring at a thing together passively, and not necessarily looking at a fire and talking to each other, or telling a story, or knitting and reading a book. Like, it's a different experience altogether. But go into a room, there's a piano. That used to be the focal reality that gave you a focal practice. There would be a time when someone in the house could play the piano, would sit there, and we would have sing-alongs. People played the song, people would sing around it. This could be hymn singing, it could be folk tunes, it could be blues, it could be whatever. And music was made more commonly in the home together. And then we know we've gone the way of, whether it's a Walkman and, your CD player, your radio, your Discman, all these different devices have only gotten more and more such that they become private experiences where you can have 3 or 4 people in 3 or 4 rooms going in and out of the rooms, listening on their earbuds to their music, their curated music. They're not even listening to it out loud together, listening to it privately. And then separating and dividing people up into these private little kind of domains. So Boardman is really big in talking about how we need to develop, once again, these focal realities and these focal practices, these things that not just for a family, but for a community, these things to look at and observe that have meaning and that they bring us together around certain practices that are in a sense communal. And communal celebration is the pinnacle of that, I think, for Albert Boardman. This is what he says in his book, Power Failure, Christianity and the Culture of Technology. So in this book, he's reflecting on Christianity, but in other books, he's just writing on technology and philosophy. He's just an adept philosopher who himself, I believe, is also a German Catholic. So he does reflect on Christian faith sometimes. He says, indifference and disengagement are the ways in which technology has invaded and subverted public life and left us with a semblance of the public. Indifference and disengagement. It is easier to be indifferent when we're basically in our privatized little boxes, right? And we've talked about this before when we were referencing Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, and how he referenced TV and digital spaces has now only become worse with social media and streaming content. Boardman's very much quoting from the same communitarian thinkers that Putnam was, including Robert Bala and others. And so what he's calling for once more is communities that can be celebratory. I can imagine for Boardman's work, reading it elsewhere, he's interested in how cities would design themselves with urban planning to create features and elements that are public in orientation and not just privatized. And he's interested in city planning in terms of events that would create a public experience of celebration, a public space for festivity, the things that we can do together that draw us out of our homes, take out the private, and to put our phones away, to have us engage something that we can that speaks to the commonality of all of us. Now, if we're going to go as far as Pieper, he would say that this has to be something that constitutes us, that gives us a meaning of who we are now. It can't just be about the past. But I think with Boardman, at least thinking about our shared history would get us further down the road.
Interesting.
Or otherwise atomized worlds, kind of pristine and cleaned up worlds of separation. So, Alan, what I'm trying to say today is that I think festivity or celebration is very much a spiritual mentality. Whether it's with the idea of God or the divine, or even if it's just the idea of gratitude, a deep felt sense of gratitude from the land. We have this food. This thing can draw us together and can create this opportunity where we celebrate without purpose and some other useful production, right? It's just a celebration, which wrapped up in that is that concept of thanksgiving and gratitude that really, I think, is a spiritual attitude to life.
I think that's beautiful, and I think it's something to aspire to.
Yeah, I think it is, and it cuts across religious and spiritual traditions.
Yep.
Requires a couple things, right? It requires discipline. That's the ironic thing.
It
to
is.
Be festive today, to be a true celebrant today, to do a thing. And I think Boardman says, the real trick is to organize a festival, not to find people who can do the work of organizing a festival, but to find people who will enjoy it. like to put the concept of work on it is almost to kill it before it starts. And they are work, right? Organizing things is work. I mean, it's a lot for the people who are going to plan a Christmas dinner or a Thanksgiving dinner or a birthday party. That's effort. It is.
Sure.
But to put the the impetus or the focus on the work aspect is to kind of kill it. So you got to find people who can be there and receive it, enjoy it, be part of it, be present to it. But doing these things now requires the effort of some way disconnecting from the impulses that drive us now.
Right.
Consumerism, production. I'm doing this so that I'm going to the celebration so that I can network and get ahead at work. Have you ever seen the movie Tree of Life by Terrence Malick?
I haven't. Tell me about it.
Terrence Malick is a philosopher turned filmmaker. He used to make a movie like once every 10 years. Tree of Life came out probably in 2011. That's just off the top of my head.
Sure.
No dialogue in the film. It's all prayers and monologues. And the dialogue happens in the background. You can hear people talking to each other, but you don't exactly know what they're saying. Sean Penn is the grown-up son of Brad Pitt's character, and I think it's Jessica Chastain. And, he's the one who did Thin Red Line and some other great films. And he talks about how in that film, their narration says there's two ways through life: the way of nature and the way of grace. The way of nature tries to please itself, I think. The way of nature is sort of seen as the way of work, get ahead, compete with each other, survive sort of thing.
Sure.
It's embodied in the father played by Brad Pitt. He's a man who's raising his kids. He loves his kids, but it's, they're don't fool around. Clean wash your hands before dinner, clean up, say you love your mama, say your prayers, do the right things, get ahead in life, work hard. They go to church. You see the kids and the mom playing and wanting to have a good time, go on a picnic or whatnot. He's out there networking with his boss and people, doing the after church convo. The other way of life is the way of grace. And it's embodied by the mom, and the way of grace is the way of play. And there's this point where the mom is playing with the kids in the backyard, and I think it's a bit of magical realism. She actually floats in the air, and it's because there's this lightness of the way of grace. But in her is the true festivity. So they went to church because there was something more meaningful than just getting ahead. It wasn't it was true religion for her. It was true worship. It wasn't the institutionality and all the hang-ups of religion like the dad. I think it's a beautiful and hard watch. It's tough existentially just to watch that film, but it's a meditation on ways of life that you can embody. It is my goal to live a life of festivity, which some people might hear, well, he just wants to consume a lot of food, maybe a lot of drink. He wants to party. No. Mm-hmm. I want to affirm being. Mm-hmm. Slow down and be together. I'd like for my life to reflect a pattern of gratitude, and wonder. Mm-hmm. It's like the poets. The poets, they see things that other people don't see because they look deeper at the world. Sometimes I want to be able to celebrate in a way that gives me that deep look into the world, to see what's more than meets the eye. Mm-hmm. I want to delight in things that don't matter. But because they don't matter, they matter. They in and of themselves matter. And so I have the one tool I think that we have in our society right now, the best tool I think we've got going for us, that is a secular tool. It cuts across all traditions and isn't inherently theistic, so you don't have to be bogged down with that if you're not a Christian or a Jew or Muslim or another believing type. And that is the national holiday of Thanksgiving. It is the closest thing, I think, of our national holidays that gets to what Pippa is begging for when he tells us that we need the gods for worship or for celebration. And I think it can get around some of the more cynical attitudes that people have about national holidays, because it's rooted in gratitude. When it's done well, it's rooted in that word Thanksgiving. And as a national holiday, it's not defining who we're thankful for or what, but if we do that, then it can be transformative, more transformative than just a Memorial Day of some historic event that we now take for granted. Whether we should or shouldn't is not my point. It's just that we do. You have any thoughts or questions for me?
No, I mean, it's brought up a lot of a lot of things for me. I knew this was going to be a challenging one as soon as you told me this is what we were going to do today, because like I say, I'm not very good at taking breaks or leisure time or finding a way to celebrate really anything. I'm so busy trying to live the life of nature, and I think that comes from a reaction to being a young artist, and everyone telling me that I was never going to make a living, I was going to be starving, all that mess or whatever. And so I definitely don't have any of those problems, but it's because of this sort of knee-jerk reaction to all of these other things. And I'm definitely in a place in my life where I'm trying to find balance. And I knew that this was going to be one of those things that I have not achieved balance in yet. So I very much appreciate your thoughts.
Well, and I would not tell you that there's some, I mean, as soon as we formalize some sort of set of rules on this that becomes self-defeating, it no longer is festivity, right? I'm not going to give you like an hour by hour a day of how you should live your life based on this, but like,
of course not.
What are moments, but like, what are the moments in life where we're not just trying to get past it or through it, we're just in it, letting it be and letting it be what it is. And that could probably, you mentioned dates with your spouse. I mean, that can, there's something of that can be true. Birthdays, but what of weekly worship, or what of a gathering? I mean, you could, given what you and your wife do musically, I don't know if you call them hootenannies or whatever, you get together people and you start playing music. I mean, that itself can be festivity.
Totally agreed.
Maybe having in your mind that this is going to get you the next Grammy is probably not going
to. Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, well, so my hope for people this summer is that they can find time for festivity and with others. Find people who will enjoy it and gather. And I think that the way that applies, going back to Borgman, is when we do that celebratory community stuff, it can kind of help knock down the barriers that technology has put up, or the technological, technocentric world puts up.
Sure.
And give us a bit more, more intimacy with each other. No major thing. I mean, just minor stuff.
Awesome.
All right, my friend. Hey, y'all. Have a great time. Be safe out there. God bless.